March 14, 2026, Gulf of Oman, 47 nautical miles southeast of Muscat. The Greek-flagged oil tanker Aegean Horizon is making 16 knots through calm seas. 299 meters of steel carrying 2 million barrels of Kuwaiti crude bound for Rotterdam. Crew of 23. Routine transit. Done it 40 times before. Except this time, there are 8 additional people on board. They are not sailors. They are not contractors. They are United States Marines, armed with FIM-92 Stinger missiles, 2 M2 Browning .50 caliber heavy machine guns, encrypted satellite communications, and orders that haven't been issued to American military personnel since 1988. Defend a foreign-flagged civilian vessel with lethal force if necessary. A commercial oil tanker with Marines on deck. That hasn't happened since the Iran-Iraq War, since Operation Earnest Will, since the last time the Persian Gulf became so dangerous that the global economy demanded an armed American presence on civilian ships. 38 years later, history is repeating. I'm your host at Navy Axis, where we break down the most critical naval operations shaping global power. Today, we're reconstructing a program that the Pentagon never officially announced, that shipping companies begged for in private, and that may have prevented the worst disruption to global energy supply since 1990. Because in early 2026, small boat attacks in the Gulf of Oman didn't just threaten tankers. They threatened the price of every gallon of gasoline on the planet, and the United States Navy responded with a solution that was equal parts brilliant and desperate. 8 Marines on a tanker with Stingers. To understand why that happened, you need to go back 5 months. October 2025. The Strait of Hormuz is tightening. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the IRGCN, has been escalating provocations since summer. Fast attack craft buzzing commercial shipping, drones overflying tanker routes, unusual radio chatter on frequencies associated with IRGC coastal missile batteries along the Iranian shoreline near Bandar Abbas. Fifth Fleet intelligence analysts at Naval Support Activity Bahrain flagged 12 separate incidents in October alone, each one individually minor. A fast boat approaching within 500 meters, a drone circling a container ship for 20 minutes, an unidentified radar contact that disappeared before it could be classified. But taken together, the pattern was unmistakable. Someone was probing, testing response times, mapping shipping lanes, identifying which tankers had security teams and which did not. The analysts compiled their assessment and sent it up the chain. Commander 5th Fleet, then Central Command in Tampa. The assessment was clear. Iranian proxy forces were preparing to expand harassment operations beyond the Strait of Hormuz into the wider Gulf of Oman and potentially the northwestern Indian Ocean. The assessment landed on desks at the Pentagon in late October. It was filed, acknowledged, and deprioritized. The South China Sea was absorbing most of the Navy's strategic attention. A carrier strike group rotation was being planned for the Western Pacific. The Gulf was considered stable enough. That was the first mistake. November 2025, the probing continues. But now the geography shifts. 3 fast boats, fiberglass hulls, twin outboard motors, no identifying markings, are spotted by a commercial vessel's bridge camera approximately 160 nautical miles southeast of the Strait of Hormuz. That's well outside the traditional harassment zone. That's in the Gulf of Oman, approaching the open Indian Ocean. The sighting is reported to the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Center in Dubai. UKMTO logs it, issues a warning to commercial traffic, and forwards the report to Combined Maritime Forces headquarters in Bahrain. The report receives a classification: suspicious approach, not hostile, not threatening, suspicious. No warship is dispatched, no aircraft diverted. The fast boats disappear into the night. 2 weeks later, another sighting. This time, 4 boats. Same profile, same area. But now they're closer to a major shipping lane, the route that connects the Gulf of Oman to the Arabian Sea, used by roughly 30% of the world's seaborne oil traffic. December 17, 2025. The first near miss. The Stavros Niarchos III, A Greek-flagged, very large crude carrier loaded with 2.1 million barrels of Saudi crude is transiting the Gulf of Oman at 14 knots. Destination: Piraeus, Greece. Insurance value of the cargo alone: $170 million. At 2:14 local time, the officer on watch detects 3 radar contacts approaching from the southeast at high speed. Estimated 35 knots. No AIS transponder. No radio communication. No navigation lights. The contacts close to within 300 meters. The bridge crew activates the ship's long-range acoustic device, a non-lethal sonic deterrent. Floodlights illuminate the water off the starboard beam. For a moment, nothing. Then, through binoculars, the second officer sees them. 3 rigid-hull inflatable boats. Armed men visible on at least 2 of them. One boat appears to be carrying something mounted on the bow. A weapon, possibly a recoilless rifle, possibly a rocket launcher. The tanker's master orders emergency speed. The ship's engine room pushes the aging turbines to 17 knots. Everything the Stavros Niarchos III can manage fully loaded. The fast boats pace the tanker for 4 minutes. Then they break off and disappear into darkness. No shots fired, no boarding attempted, but the message was received. 12 days later, December 29th, it happens again. The Minerva Glory, another Greek-flagged tanker, reports an almost identical encounter. 4 fast boats, same area, same time of night, same approach pattern. This time, the tanker's crew reports seeing what appeared to be a muzzle flash from one of the boats, though no projectile impact is found on the hull. 2 near misses on Greek-flagged tankers in 12 days. Same operational signature, same geographic zone, same time window. The early hours of the morning, when bridge crews are at minimum manning. This is not piracy. Somali pirates operate further south and use different tactics. They approach in skiffs, fire warning shots, attempt to board with ladders and grappling hooks. They want the ship. They want hostages. They want ransom. These boats don't want to board. They want to intimidate. They want to demonstrate capability. They want to send a message. Naval intelligence analysts at 5th Fleet run the pattern through their databases. The boat profiles match craft used by IRGC-trained proxy forces operating out of coastal camps in Yemen and southern Somalia. The tactics mirror training doctrine recovered from an IRGC naval advisory mission intercepted in 2024. The timing correlates with increased encrypted communications traffic between Tehran and proxy networks in the Horn of Africa. The conclusion arrives at CENTCOM headquarters on January 3, 2026. The assessment is no longer filed and deprioritized. It goes directly to the Secretary of Defense. Iranian proxy forces have expanded their operational reach. The Strait of Hormuz is no longer the only choke point at risk. The entire Gulf of Oman and northwestern Indian Ocean are now potential threat zones, and the shipping industry reacts before the military does. January 6, 2026. Lloyd's of London Joint War Committee adds the Gulf of Oman east of longitude 58 degrees to its listed areas of perceived enhanced risk. Insurance premiums for tankers transiting the region triple overnight. A standard transit policy that cost $400,000 in December now costs $1.2 million. Major tanker companies do the math immediately. Rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope adds approximately 3,400 nautical miles to a Europe-bound voyage from the Persian Gulf. At standard cruising speed, that's 12 additional days at sea, 12 days of fuel, crew costs, and delayed delivery. For a single VLCC, the rerouting cost is roughly $1.8 million per voyage, but $1.8 million is more predictable than a $1.2 million insurance premium that might climb higher next week, and it's infinitely more predictable than losing a ship. By January 10th, 3 major Greek shipping companies, controlling roughly 40 tankers that regularly transit the Gulf of Oman, announced they are considering rerouting. 2 Norwegian firms follow. A Singaporean fleet operator suspends Gulf bookings entirely. The oil markets notice. Brent crude spikes $4 a barrel in 2 trading sessions. Analysts at Goldman Sachs publish a note warning that sustained rerouting could add $6 to $8 per barrel to European energy costs. The Pentagon notices too. January 14, 2026. An emergency meeting convenes in the tank. The secure conference room in the Pentagon's Joint Staff Corridor. Present, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Chief of Naval Operations, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the Commander of CENTCOM via secure video link from Tampa, and the Commander of Fifth Fleet from Bahrain. The problem is straightforward. The solution is not. Fifth Fleet has 7 warships in the Gulf of Oman region, 2 guided missile destroyers, 2 frigates, a logistics ship, a submarine, location classified, and 1 amphibious transport dock carrying elements of the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit, 7 ships to cover an area of approximately 900,000 square nautical miles. That's 1 warship per 128,000 square nautical miles. On any given day, 30 to 40 commercial tankers transit this zone. You cannot escort all of them. You cannot even escort most of them. There are simply not enough hulls. During Operation Earnest Will in 1987-88, the Navy escorted reflagged Kuwaiti tankers through the Persian Gulf, a much smaller area, roughly 600 nautical miles long. Even then, it required a dozen warships operating in continuous rotation, and they still lost the Samuel B. Roberts to an Iranian mine. The Gulf of Oman is 3 times that operational area, and the Navy has half the available ships. The CENTCOM commander presents 3 options. Option 1, surge additional warships from other theaters. Cost, stripping assets from the Western Pacific at a moment of heightened Chinese military activity. The CNO rejects this immediately. Moving a destroyer from the South China Sea to the Indian Ocean takes 14 days and sends exactly the wrong signal to Beijing. Option 2, request Allied participation. NATO partners, the Royal Navy, the French Marine Nationale. Feasible but slow. Coalition building takes weeks. Diplomatic coordination takes longer. The shipping companies are making rerouting decisions now. Option 3 is different. It comes from the Commandant of the Marine Corps, and it changes the conversation. Put Marines on the tankers themselves. The room goes quiet. Small detachments. 8 Marines per team, armed with crew-served weapons and man-portable air defense, embarked directly on commercial vessels. Visible deterrence at the point of threat rather than area patrol from warships that may be hundreds of miles away when an attack occurs. The concept has a precedent. Operation Earnest Will, naval armed guard detachments in World War II. The principle is ancient. Put armed men on merchant ships when the sea lanes are threatened. But it hasn't been done in 38 years. The legal framework is complex. Status of forces agreements, flag state consent, rules of engagement aboard a vessel the Navy doesn't own, operating in international waters, flagged to a foreign country. The lawyers need time. The shipping companies don't have time. January 18, 2026, the White House National Security Council convenes a principals meeting. The president is briefed on 3 data points. First, insurance premiums are still climbing. Second, 2 more tanker companies have announced rerouting. Third, oil futures for March delivery have risen $9 a barrel since December. The president authorizes the program. Legal framework to be resolved in parallel with operational deployment. The program receives a classified operational name that has not been publicly confirmed. Sources familiar with the planning describe it internally as Sentinel Shield. The execution timeline is aggressive. First Marine teams to be embarked on commercial vessels within 30 days. January 20th, 2026, Camp Lemonnier, Djibouti. The 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit receives a fragmentary order. Select personnel for Maritime Vessel Protection Detachment operations. Team composition: 1 Staff Sergeant Team Leader, 1 Sergeant Assistant Team Leader, 2 corporals serving as weapons team leaders, 4 Lance Corporals as riflemen and designated marksmen, 8 Marines total. Weapons loadout per team: 2 FIM-92, J Stinger missiles with grip stock and IFF Interrogator, 2 M2A1, Browning .50 caliber machine guns with 2,000 rounds per weapon, 4 M27 infantry automatic rifles, 1 M110A1 squad, designated marksman rifle with thermal optic, night vision devices for all team members, encrypted AN/PRC-117G satellite radios for direct communication with 5th Fleet and CENTCOM. Training begins immediately. The Marines have done shipboard operations before. Visit, board, search, and seizure is a core MEU mission. But this is different. They're not boarding a hostile vessel. They're defending a friendly one against fast boat swarms, at night, in open ocean, on a ship they've never been on before, with a civilian crew that speaks Greek or Filipino or Korean. The training covers fields of fire from a tanker's superstructure, weapon emplacement on commercial deck layouts, communication protocols with civilian bridge crews, medical evacuation procedures when the nearest hospital is 400 nautical miles away, and the rules of engagement. The ROE are restrictive, deliberately so. A Marine team on a foreign-flagged civilian vessel in international waters operates under a legal framework that would make most combat commanders uncomfortable. They can fire only if the vessel is actively under attack, not if it's being approached, not if hostile intent is assessed, only if weapons are being employed against the ship. Active attack. Rounds impacting the hull or ordnance detonating in proximity. Nothing less triggers weapons release authority. The Marines understand. They don't like it, but they understand. February 8, 2026. The first test case. 2 Marine detachments fly by MV-22 Osprey from Camp Lemonnier to the deck of the USS Mesa Verde, an amphibious transport dock operating in the Gulf of Oman. From there, they transfer by rigid hull inflatable boat to 2 commercial tankers that have agreed to participate in the program. The first is the Aegean Horizon, the Greek-flagged VLCC that will become the most photographed tanker in the world within a month. The second is the Nordic Sovereign, a Norwegian-flagged Suezmax tanker operated by a Bergen-based company that was among the first to request protection. Both vessels' masters have been briefed. Both flag states, Greece and Norway, have provided diplomatic consent through back-channel agreements that bypass normal treaty timelines. The legal framework is still being finalized, but operational necessity has overtaken process. The Marines set up positions on both tankers within hours. The .50 caliber machine guns are mounted on reinforced tripod positions welded to the deck by the ship's own engineering crews. Sandbag emplacements are constructed at 4 points around each superstructure. The Stinger teams establish observation posts on the bridge wings with clear 360 sight lines. 8 Marines on a tanker deck, looking out at the Gulf of Oman through thermal optics. Waiting. February 12, 2026. They don't have to wait long. The Aegean Horizon is 73 nautical miles southeast of Ras Al Had, the eastern tip of Oman, when the team leader, Staff Sergeant Miguel Reyes, spots contacts on the thermal imager. 3 small craft, approaching from the south at estimated 30 knots. No lights, no AIS. Reyes alerts the bridge. The tanker's master, Captain Dimitrios Konstantopoulos, confirms no friendly traffic expected in the area. UKMTO has no scheduled military exercises. Fifth Fleet reports no coalition warships within 60 nautical miles. The contacts close to 2,000 meters, 1,500, 1,000. At 800 meters, the Marines illuminate the approaching boats with infrared laser designators invisible to the naked eye, but unmistakable to anyone with night vision equipment. It's a signal. We see you. We know you're there. The boats slow. At 600 meters, Reyes orders the visible deterrent. The floodlights on the tanker's port side activate, and for the first time, the occupants of the approaching boats see what's on the tanker's deck. 2.50 caliber machine guns, manned, trained directly at them, and Marines in full combat gear lining the rail. The boats hold position for approximately 90 seconds. Then they turn south and accelerate away. No shots fired, no hostile action, no ROE threshold crossed, but the encounter is not invisible. A container ship transiting the same lane, 2 nautical miles to the east, has its bridge camera recording. The footage, grainy, infrared enhanced, but unmistakable, shows armed personnel on a tanker deck illuminated by floodlights, with what appears to be crew-served weapons emplaced behind sandbag positions. The footage is posted to a maritime tracking forum within 36 hours. Within 72 hours, it's on every shipping industry news site in the world. Lloyd's List runs it as their lead story. The headline, U.S. Marines embarked on commercial tankers in Gulf of Oman. The Pentagon does not confirm or deny, but the effect is immediate. February 15th to February 25th, 2026. The program expands rapidly. More tanker companies request marine detachments. The demand vastly exceeds supply. The 26th MEU can field approximately 12 eight-man teams simultaneously while maintaining its other operational commitments. 12 teams, 12 tankers. On any given day, there are 30 to 40 tankers in the threat zone. The math doesn't work. Everyone knows it. But something unexpected happens. The fast boats stop coming. February 20th, 0 harassment incidents reported in the Gulf of Oman. February 21st, 0. February 22nd, 0. By February 28th, UKMTO reports an 80% reduction in suspicious approach incidents compared to the December-January peak. 12 marine teams, protecting 12 ships, and 40 ships are safer because of it. The deterrence works not because every tanker has Marines. It works because any tanker might have Marines. A fast boat crew approaching an unlit tanker at 2 in the morning can no longer assume the ship is defenseless. That calculation, the uncertainty of whether this particular tanker has .50 caliber guns waiting behind sandbag walls, changes everything. In game theory, it's called a mixed strategy equilibrium. You don't need to defend every target. You need to make attacking any target potentially costly. 8 Marines with Stingers and heavy machine guns represent roughly $40,000 per day in operational costs when you factor personnel, equipment, logistics, and transport. A guided missile destroyer conducting the same patrol costs approximately $200,000 per day in fuel, maintenance, and crew costs. 5 times more expensive, and the destroyer can only be in one place. The Marines are on the ship that matters, the one being targeted. Comment tanker war if you think this was the right call. March 2026. The program is working, but cracks are appearing. The 26th MEU was not designed for sustained maritime vessel protection. It was designed for amphibious assault, crisis response, and non-combatant evacuation. Every Marine team on a tanker is a team not available for those core missions. 2,200 Marines in the MEU, 96 committed to tanker detachments at any given time. Another 40 in the logistics pipeline, transiting to and from vessels, conducting turnover briefs, maintaining equipment. That's 136 Marines, roughly 6% of the MEU's total strength, dedicated to a mission that wasn't in anyone's operational plans 6 months ago. The MEU commander sends a message to Marine Forces Central Command. The message is respectful, professional, and blunt. This is not sustainable at current force levels without reinforcement or mission trade-offs. March 4th, 2026. A different kind of problem emerges. The Stena Impero II, a British-flagged tanker whose predecessor was famously seized by Iran in 2019, requests a Marine detachment. The British government, initially supportive of the American program, raises an objection. If U.S. Marines are on a British-flagged vessel and engage in combat, does that constitute a British act of war? Does it obligate British military response? Does Parliament need to be consulted? The legal questions that were supposed to be resolved in parallel with deployment are still unresolved. Flag state consent was obtained through informal diplomatic channels, but informal channels don't hold up in parliamentary inquiries. The British request is deferred. The Stena Impero II transits without Marines. Nothing happens, but the precedent is uncomfortable. March 9th, 2026. Iran breaks its silence. The Iranian Foreign Ministry issues a statement condemning what it calls the illegal militarization of commercial shipping by the United States. The statement accuses Washington of transforming the Gulf of Oman into a zone of American military occupation and warns that the presence of armed military forces on civilian vessels constitutes a provocation that threatens regional stability. The IRGC Navy commander goes further. In a televised address, Rear Admiral Alireza Tangsiri declares that Iran reserves the right to inspect any vessel carrying foreign military personnel in waters adjacent to Iranian territory. The threat is ambiguous. The Gulf of Oman is international waters. Iran has no legal right to inspect vessels transiting international waters regardless of who's on board. But legal rights and operational reality are different things. Iran's fast attack craft fleet numbers over 1,500 boats. Its shore-based anti-ship missile batteries can target vessels up to 300 kilometers from the coast. If Iran decides to escalate, 12 Marine teams with Stingers are not going to deter a coordinated IRGCN operation. March 12, 2026, the escalation that everyone feared almost materializes. The Nordic Sovereign, one of the two original vessels in the program, is transiting 58 nautical miles south of Jask, Iran, when the Marine team detects a new type of contact. Not fast boats, an unmanned aerial vehicle, orbiting the tanker at approximately 2,000 feet altitude. The drone matches the profile of an Ababel-3, a reconnaissance UAV operated by the IRGC. It's not armed, but its presence means something. Someone in Iran is actively surveilling the Marine teams, mapping their positions, cataloging their equipment, assessing their capabilities. The team leader requests weapons release authority to engage the drone with a Stinger. Fifth Fleet denies the request. The drone is not attacking the vessel. The ROE are clear. Observation is not an attack. The drone orbits for 47 minutes. Then it returns north toward the Iranian coast. The Marines watch it go. They know they've been cataloged. Staff Sergeant Reyes, back on the Aegean horizon for his third rotation, sends a situation report that night. One line stands out. Adversary is adapting. Recommend ROE review for unmanned systems. The recommendation enters the bureaucratic pipeline. It has not been acted upon as of early April, March 19, 2026. The cost equation starts to shift. 4 more shipping companies request Marine detachments. The 26th MEU is tapped out. Marine Forces Central Command requests augmentation from 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force at Camp Lejeune. The request requires Secretary of Defense approval because it involves deploying additional forces to CENTCOM's area of responsibility. The approval takes 6 days. During those 6 days, 3 tanker companies that were waiting for Marine teams announce rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope. Insurance premiums, which had briefly stabilized in late February, tick upward again. The program's success is creating its own demand signal, and the supply can't keep up. March 25, 2026, reinforcements arrive. A company-sized element from 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines deploys to Camp Lemonnier. An additional 80 Marines, enough to field 10 more teams. Total capacity, 22 simultaneous detachments. Better, but still not enough to cover every tanker that wants protection. The Pentagon begins exploring alternatives. Contracted armed security teams, private military companies could supplement the Marines. Several firms, including veterans of the anti-piracy operations off Somalia, offer their services. The legal framework for private security on commercial vessels is well established. It's how the shipping industry solved the Somali pirate problem a decade ago. But putting contractors alongside Marines creates command and control problems. Who has weapons release authority? Whose ROE apply? If a contractor fires and a Marine wouldn't have, who's responsible? The questions multiply faster than the answers. April 1st, 2026, a congressional delegation visits 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. 3 senators, 2 representatives, all from the Armed Services Committees. They're briefed on the tanker protection program. The briefing lasts 4 hours. The delegation leaves with 2 conclusions. First, the program is working. Fast boat harassment is down 80%. Insurance premiums have stabilized, though not returned to pre-crisis levels. Tanker rerouting has slowed. Oil markets have calmed. Second, the program cannot continue indefinitely at current scale without either significantly more resources or a diplomatic resolution to the underlying threat. Senator Margaret Chen, ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, tells reporters at Bahrain International Airport, "We're asking a few hundred Marines to hold together a system that moves 20% of the world's oil. That's an extraordinary burden on an extraordinarily small force." She's right. The math is simple and unforgiving. Roughly 17 million barrels of oil transit the Gulf of Oman daily. The global economy depends on that flow. Disrupting it by even 10% sends energy markets into chaos. Protecting it requires Marine teams on tankers. The Marine teams require logistics, transport, medical support, communications, and command infrastructure. All of that costs money and draws resources from other missions. The estimated annual cost of sustaining the program at 22 teams, approximately $320 million. The estimated economic impact of a sustained 10% disruption to Gulf oil transit, $40 to $60 billion annually in increased energy costs to the global economy, $320 million to prevent $60 billion in damage. By that measure, it's the most cost-effective force projection the Navy has deployed in decades. The supporters are vocal. The Marines on tankers cost less than a single guided missile destroyer and protect more commerce. The critics are equally vocal. You can't garrison the world's shipping lanes with 8-man teams. What happens when Iran doesn't just send fast boats? What happens when an anti-ship missile hits a tanker with Marines on board? Are those Marines expendable sentries? And the deepest criticism: this is a tactical solution to a strategic problem. The fast boats are a symptom. The disease is Iranian proxy warfare capability. Putting Marines on tankers doesn't degrade that capability. It just raises the cost of employing it. Subscribe if you want to see how this situation evolves. April 8, 2026. The program continues. 22 Marine teams are embarked on commercial vessels across the Gulf of Oman and northwestern Indian Ocean. Harassment incidents remain suppressed. The drone surveillance flights continue, now averaging 3 per week. Iran has filed a formal protest with the International Maritime Organization. The protest is procedural, not operational. It changes nothing on the water. But something else is changing. The proxy networks are shifting their geography. Fifth Fleet Intelligence detects increased fast boat activity further south, off the Somali coast, near the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, in waters where the Marine teams are not operating. The threat isn't gone, it's migrating, moving to where the Marines aren't. And there aren't enough Marines to be everywhere. This is the fundamental tension of the tanker protection program. It works where it's applied. But the ocean is vast, the adversary is adaptive, and the force is finite. Staff Sergeant Reyes, completing his 4th rotation on the Aegean horizon, writes in his after-action report, "Deterrence is holding in our operational zone, but the adversary has the initiative in choosing where to apply pressure. We are reacting. We need to start anticipating." The report is forwarded up the chain. It sits alongside a dozen similar assessments from team leaders across the fleet. The consensus is clear. The Marines are buying time, not solving the problem. Time for what? That's the question no one in Washington has answered. The tanker protection program began as an emergency measure, a 30-day sprint. It's now entering its 3rd month. The Marines are tired. The logistics chain is strained. The legal framework is still incomplete. The diplomatic situation with Iran is no closer to resolution. And yet, the oil flows. The tankers transit. The premiums are stable. The global economy that depends on 17 million barrels a day passing through a stretch of ocean where armed men in fast boats wanted to cause chaos, that economy is functioning. Because 8 Marines on a tanker deck, visible through binoculars at 3 in the morning, changed the calculation. Not with overwhelming force, not with carrier strike groups or cruise missiles or stealth bombers. With Staff Sergeant Reyes and his 7 Marines, their Stingers, their .50 cals, and their presence. The most powerful military in the world, projecting force through its smallest unit. There's a phrase in military doctrine, economy of force, using the minimum resources necessary to achieve the desired effect. The tanker protection program may be the purest example of that principle in modern American military history. It is also, by its nature, temporary. Economy of force works until the adversary finds a way around it. Iran's proxies are already adapting. The drone flights are intelligence preparation of the battlefield. The geographic shift southward is operational repositioning. The question is not whether the Marine teams will face a real attack. The question is when, and whether, when that moment comes, the rules of engagement will allow 8 Marines to do what they were trained to do. 1 staff sergeant on a tanker deck, looking through thermal optics at an ocean that wants to burn. That's the state of the Gulf of Oman in April 2026. Not a war, not peace, something in between. something that depends, for now, on a very small number of people standing watch on ships that aren't theirs, in waters that belong to no one, defending a global system that most people never think about, until the price at the pump changes. Then, everyone thinks about it.